they're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the WarWolf Podcast. We're going to be doing something a bit different tonight as compared to what we usually do on this show, for we have a special guest joining us today on this episode, who happens to be running for a seat on the U.S. Senate. And so instead of the standard, freewheeling, rather disjointed type of show we usually do, tonight we're going to be conducting a formal interview with the man currently running to be Republican nominee for Senate candidate out of Oregon. So, with that being said, let me introduce you all to U.S. Senate candidate running for the Republican nomination and eventually the seat of Jeff Markley out of Oregon. I would like to introduce you to David Burch.
Nice to meet you. Well, I mean, meet is a bit strong. I've been on the podcast before, but you know what I mean.
Fair enough, and welcome to the show. So, with that, I would like to ask you, tell the audience in as many words as you like, who exactly are you?
Well, I am a Oregon born and bred man with a lot of interests, hobbies, and one of them just happens to be politics. I am essentially the worst version of what is known as the Politisberg. I'm very much a pro-MAGA type person. I grew up out of Medford, currently living in Salem. I do VTubing on the side. I write novels on the side. I do a wide variety of shit. Think of, the whole jack of all trades, master of none, but the next evolution of that of master of many trades. I am personally invested in running for these offices for very emotional centric reasons. I'll leave it at that. And I am a very driven and ambitious individual. I'm somebody who does not like debt, so that if I were to win the election, I would be doing my utmost to repay basically what I'm given. I think that one of the biggest hooks of why you should trust someone like me in office is because I have the integrity to an unreasonable degree of paying my debts on time. And running for office and becoming a senator would be a debt I would be indebted to. And as a guy who does not like debt, who has waited until 35 years old to even have a credit score, I think that speaks for itself of how much the concept of repaying what I owe matters to me.
Yes, well, so someone so adverse to debt would definitely be a benefit to the 37 or 38 trillion dollar in debt federal government.
Absolutely. Well, my feelings on that are complicated. Can I I got a little bit of an us Oregonians kind of really don't like it when people call it Oregon.
Oh. Fair enough. How is it supposed to be pronounced then, for the record?
Oregon, as
Oregon.
in pew pew kind of gun.
All right, good to know. So you mentioned before that you were, in so much words, you're somewhat of a political junkie, like we all are. Has that always been the case for you, or have you found this more of a recent thing where you've becoming more invested in politics in general? And if it has been long term, what was that evolution like? Like, what did you start out believing, and how has that changed over time?
To describe it would be spotty. So how it started was when I was 11 years old, 9/11 happened. And during that time, I was going through the process of medical diagnoses, and I did something really stupid and cut my sister's hair without permission. And how my parents punished me for it was to read the book of, 141 presidents in the time of 2001 for, the whatnot. So they had me read the entire book, write an essay about, what each president was, known for and whatnot. And, to have my personal favorites of the presidents and so on and so forth. And along the way, I kind of just as a academics, history, etc. junkie, I just developed a taste for politics along the way. I even did stuff like, promoting Ted Kulingowski when I was a kid in middle school. I was all about the Kulingowski train. So I was the kid that was so obnoxiously into politics that, you know, you pretty much hated me. And I say it's spotty because I had some moments in life where I just could not do so. I was in a lot of situations where I ended up in a state of emotional or mental comatosis, I guess you would put it. Catatonic, basically. I was not like in a mental space to do so. In a very early portion of my life, I went through a lot of shit involving a lot of disturbing history of mine. I'll leave it at that. The point being is that I was in certain points of my life where I could not get fully delved into my interests in politics. Over time, once those wounds had healed, that was when I started getting into politics. Think of starting like from 2004, 2008 was kind of where 2004 to 2009 was when I stopped doing politics for a while. Being into that because of personal reasons. But then roughly around 2010, 2012-ish, I started getting involved in internet activism as both a person involved in the early work of both the LGBTQ plus community and then switching sides over to MAGA in roughly 2014 because I had been booted out of the community for some pretty salacious comments involving celebrities with the community. In essence, I got booted out as a critic of their policy of associating with celebrity individuals for the sake of optics. And so my general path in the MAGA community started in 2014 up until here and now. So it's basically, like I said, been pretty spotty.
All right. So a few interesting things you said there. I want to dive a bit deeper in. Since you said that you had to basically learn about all the presidents up to 9/11, who's your favorite president from up to 9/11, and why?
Okay, so this is a complicated question. My offhand, I'd say Teddy Roosevelt, which won't make sense because he's not he's like in my top 5, not the favorite, but like it's weird because like offhand in isolation, probably Teddy Roosevelt. He's probably third in an overall top ranking. But if I were to pick any president as an ideal, it would be Teddy Roosevelt.
Good choice. Personally, I'd have to put mine as probably Calvin Coolidge, but Teddy's also
Really?
a good choice. Of course, Silent Cal for the win. And not just because of the very entertaining stories about him pranking people, though I do have to admit those play a role.
Dale, I gotta side with you on this. Coolidge.
He was always
Coolidge is a cool dude.
Yeah.
He was always a guy that I just never really saw much in, so that's interesting. I did not know people liked him.
Well, just as an aside, have you ever heard the famous Calvin Coolidge story about how at one point he was at a party and a young socialite, like rich,
Right.
rich woman walks up to him and said, I bet this other gentleman that I could make you say more than 2 words. And Silent Cal turns up, looks over to her and says, "You lose," and walks away.
More. Oh my god, that's actually kind of clever.
Yes, and he was also, fun fact, president right as they built the first panic button into his office in the White House, and he would often press it and then run off and hide just to troll his staff.
Oh God.
Yes, legendary man. But anyways, getting off topic, back to what you were saying. The other thing I wanted to ask about your background, because you have a bit of an interesting one in that you started more as like in the whole LGBTQ space and then ended up finding yourself in MAGA. So would you say that whole group of people in general is far too, obsessed with orthodoxy and just like kicking everyone out who dares disagree with them on anything?
It's complicated. I am someone who is also very known to sound pretentious as hell. So there's probably a solid chance that I made myself have no favors whatsoever, because I'm always someone who says it very direct, does not soften it, straight up, and could arguably be argued that I'm biased against celebrities in general. So, I don't do myself no favors, so I kind of cannot say definitively. But if Twitter has shown me anything, there is a solid chunk of them. So it's not an easy yes or no answer, unfortunately.
Fair enough. As to your then transition to MAGA, what about that whole political movement did you find yourself most interested in as you eventually joined the movement?
Well, I wanted to basically build up my own profile. I wanted to I've always been someone trying to be obsessed with having the finger on the pulse. I've always wanted to be a person that had a pretty sizable influence, and I saw something in that movement. I saw a chance to be a shadowy hand in culture from a very sizable portion of time. And I saw something of extreme cultural value that could dominate the entirety of not just human history, but downright human psychology. And good God, was I on point with that. I wanted to have a sizable influence without being known. Because at the time I joined on, I was 24. So I couldn't run for any of the offices I wanted to run for. So I looked at it as originally to be a placeholder. Unfortunately, things didn't pan out that way because, I was still, by the time I did run for those positions I wanted to have, I still wasn't well known, and I kind of shot my own idea in the foot. But I've always been someone who wants to kind of lurk in the space, day by day, like put my fingers in the pie, talk and deal with people in a variety of ways. And it's been a fucking blast, let me put it to you that way. It has been an absolute blast, and I'm glad I did.
And one more thing I'm wondering about your background. So you mentioned that you are a VTuber as well. And
yes.
Not only if you win, you would be the very first VTuber member of the U.S. government, or maybe any government anywhere, which would be a feat in and of itself. But
right.
How did you become? What drew you to VTubing? How did you become a VTuber?
So that one's also kind of a weird tale. I've been into anime since the mid to late 1990s when I was a kid. My dad basically one time put on the TV and Pokemon Season 1 was there. And I'm born in 90, so as a kid I'm like really hooked onto it. And then I discovered Digimon, and then I discovered Monster Rancher. And then as time moves on and I start discovering other series, roughly around 2009-ish, after my father passed away in 2008, I really delved into the hardcore anime otaku scene, watched hundreds of anime in the span of a few years. And then I started a YouTube channel, which was mostly about live streaming and anime and all that intersection stuff. And then the first round of going, I kind of just LARPed as Megumin. And I'm not even joking. There was a program called FaceRig that lets you it was basically the proto VTube Studio and those sorts of programs. And they had a Megumin model, and I'm like, okay, fine. This will be a fun little thing. And then for a while, it stopped being a little thing and started being a big thing. And then the people who got me into the first round of trying to be a VTuber, we had a falling out, to put it respectfully. And we are not only no longer talking, we also don't really like each other. So for a couple of years after that, I ended up having a dark spell where I was hating on VTubers, which really wasn't hate as much as it was feeling hurt and sorry for myself. But then two longtime friends from, my previous YouTube channel decided one day that they wanted to do VTubing themselves. And so we all agreed that we wanted to kind of do a VTuber group. And so, I was looking for a model and I found a pre-built and I'm like, okay, cool. And it was a white model, not a green model. But something happened to the white model. The white model got its data corrupted and I didn't back it up. So then I was like, okay, fine, fuck it. I'll get a different model, even though I really wanted the white one. And I found a green model. And it looked really adorable. So I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll take it. And then I just started running with that and mixing it with my Twitter account, aka I am Nor. And I'm like trying to, integrate both my personal interests as a politician and my obsession with like creating characters out of Twitter accounts. And then when a different Twitter account of mine got banned, I decided to just put all of my efforts into one account. And that's basically the birth of the hybrid nature of what my current Twitter account is. And then, after my buddies didn't follow through on establishing the VTuber group, then a very key event happened there. And that key event being twofold. VTards, the VTuber group VTards, and then also the Gus Waltz fiasco with, Tim Waltz and that sort of thing.
Oh, yes.
And people were not happy with my position on that because despite me being someone who was, shared the disabilities of Gus Waltz, aka, I am on the spectrum, I completely just did not fucking agree with it. I did not agree at all with the philosophy of siding with Gus Waltz. I'm like, I don't care if he's autistic, he's a 17-year-old grown-ass man. Treat him as such.
Who is Gus Waltz, and what was this?
The son, do you know who Tim Waltz is, right?
Yes.
That's his son.
Oh.
There was an entire cultural meltdown because there was initial controversy that Vance and crew were making fun of him, and people were not a fan of. And I'm just like, dude, like when I was going through heavy shit when I was 14, 15, 16, we were using the slur faggot all the time,
Of course. A word that we are very much used to here on this show.
And I'm just like, dude, he's a 17-year-old grown-ass kid, grown-ass man. He can handle a few insults. I get that he's, like, nonverbal, and I do sympathize with that, but I don't side with him, especially since I have my own grudges of a multitude against the Democratic Party. And I might as well just establish my ideology from this. For a majority of my life prior to MAGA in general, my ideology has always leaned Jeffersonian to, Benjamin Franklin levels of liberalism. Not like the fucking crazy far left shit these days, but like, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness shit.
Right, so like
And that
more
was because
classical liberalism rather than, say, modern liberalism.
To be objective, yes. To be subjective, I really hate that because it feels disrespectful to the concept. But
Understand.
that's just my personal gripes on it.
Yes. So one last question for your VTubing. Since you are a VTuber and general anime enthusiast, let us assume you manage to win the Senate seat, and assuming also that Elon Musk gets his way, would you vote to legalize catgirls?
That's a very tricky question, and that also involves the 13th Amendment.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry. That was probably the darkest of humor, but still. If you wanted to know why I even make that joke, play the visual novel of Nekopara. Everything will be explained.
Okay. That was stellar, by the way. Holy shit.
Thank you.
Man.
All right then. Then getting to some more serious topics now. I think you we are now familiar with who you are and why you're running. Moving on to some policy questions. Now, what some people, or arguably what no one except the people here know, is that we were actually initially planning to have you on last week. But then a tiny little thing like, I don't know, Iran blowing up happened, and so we ended up having to cover that. So, in the interest of recent events, do you have any thoughts on the current situation that's going on in Iran or in the Middle East in general?
I do have some, and I know it's going to sound very Zionist, but I'm not really for them either. I hate when, like, topics about this boil down to anti-Israel shit. Like, because the reason why I say this is because as a huge fan of U.S. history, I know that America has been wanting war of some kind with Iran for decades. And that is usually my personal input on it, is that this has been a long overdue, long desired war that we've been having. We just needed the justification for it. And we got that, and then we struck. I am personally very much a fan of, politics as a gray zone. We do bad things to protect the people at home. And when I see someone building nukes from a country that has been notorious for saying the phrase, death to America, I hope that doesn't require censorship. When you have those two factors into it, I really just don't care about whether Israel benefits from it or not. But here's my play on it. Not only does the strike in Iran benefit us as Americans, it also technically does, involve a cost that I kind of utilize to my advantage on Twitter. Because I kind of already knew that Israel was going to get struck on it, because a lot of the countries that want America dead can't fully strike us. So obviously they were going to direct their strikes to Israel. So I found a neat little little crevice to kind of exploit to show that I'm not pro-Israel or anti-Israel. I'm just pro-history, pro-logic, and my brain doesn't turn to mush when we strike a nation that Israel supposedly also benefits from. I look at it as a form of U.S. interventionism. When there's a nation that intends to threaten us, and I grew up on 9/11, so this definitely informs my views, because, it was during a time that literally intersected with my interests in history. When you grow up as a person who witnesses 9/11 when you're 11 years old, it kind of informs your views on certain Middle Eastern countries. So I used the context of 9/11 to say, look, I don't like interventionism, but when you have an enemy that wants to kill you, you're probably going to side with the power that seeks to defeat the power that kills you. That is a matter of pragmatic practicality that a lot of the anti-Israel crowd seems to casually forget because they have Israel porn brain.
Yes. So,
as I like to describe.
Fair enough. So being someone who grew up on 9/11, it would, I think, also be fair to say then that you also grew up on the whole, 20-year quagmire that was Iraq and Afghanistan. So
Correct.
Is your support for this whole current thing in Iran contingent upon it not becoming that? Or are you also...
Yes.
All right.
I am. My point is that we should always do the most minimal. I hate to do a game quote for serious issues, but min-maxing.
Of course.
We should always min-max everything we possibly can. I also am aware that war is messy, but the U.S. is notorious for being able to make small-scale conflicts pretty quick and clean.
Yes. And I think a good segue on that is, I'm sure you're aware of, before Iran, we had this little thing that happened in Venezuela as well. And
Correct.
I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on what we did in Venezuela?
Personal sense of conflict. On one hand, while I do hear people bitch and complain about interventionism and, bitch and complain about how there's no, consistency in the MAGA movement, it's really not the case. What people misunderstand about U.S. interventionism is we're talking about wars on a full-on war scale, not Iraq wars, not war in Afghanistan, not a night raid to take out Maduro, which, by the way, the president wasn't even behind technically because it was the Supreme Court who unraveled the warrant, which meant Trump had to do it anyways. That's a neat little factor that people don't even know, is that the Supreme Court unwrapped the warrant for Maduro, and that's why Trump actually struck him. So when we talk about anti-interventionism, we're talking about on the scale of a full-on war between equal powers. Think of World War I, II, etc. We're not talking about Iraq or Afghanistan that we oppose, because we do that every day since the dawn of time, or dawn of American time. We're talking about stuff on an equal scale. Iraq is not an equal scale. A war with, say, Russia or, supporting Ukraine is. When we do stuff like Iran or Venezuela, it's pretty much implied that our interventionism is quick, clean, efficient, and one-sided.
Right, and Venezuela clearly was pretty efficient and one-sided.
Correct.
I'm just happy that they dropped a big fat bomb on that commie Hugo Chavez's tomb, personally. But now, do you think that there is a difference, let's say, in kind with these sort of operations going on in, say, the Western Hemisphere, as opposed to them going on much further outside of, where America is? Or do you see them as similar in kind, even if they take place, say, 10,000 miles away?
My answer to that is complex. While there is more of a cultural aspect to the same hemisphere, it also, tactically speaking, is essentially one and the same. It's particularly south of the Mexican border. Anything Central America or below will inevitably have the same military and tactical involvement or value as an Iranian strike. And it's usually for the same motivations to resources or, American imperatives.
Right. And on that, because it looks like the U.S. is also getting ready to topple the regime in Cuba, are you in support of that, or are you more hesitant in all of them overthrowing the commies in Cuba as well as the commies in Venezuela?
I'm split mentally versus emotionally. Mentally, because I see it as a need to be done, but emotionally I am hesitant on it because of the whole, JFK Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm a big fan of JFK. So, I'm a little cagey around stuff that JFK wanted to, prevent a nuclear war with. That being said, I also know it's completely, historically removed from those days. So you can kind of see my conflict in that regard.
Fair enough. And just as an aside, since you mentioned JFK, who do you think actually killed him? Do you believe the official story, or do you believe that someone else was the shooter?
I just think that overall our focus on it is a little silly, because at the end of the day, who benefits from it doesn't really matter. It was still done by a loony bin, and the loony bin is what we dealt with. Did he actually do it? There's evidence for and against. But even if it was not Lee Harvey Oswald, is it really a conspiracy? Or is it just a different complete loon? Because I just see JFK as somebody who makes a lot of enemies. People who are good-natured but in power rub people who are not so good-natured the wrong way. And that, in my opinion, that sort of mentality by other people kind of gets stretched out a bit, because what we could argue for one person can also be argued for a group of people, but I hold to the belief that it's just one or two people.
Fair enough. Is it also fair to say that your thoughts on the matter are more to the effect of it doesn't really it happened 60 years ago and doesn't it doesn't really matter, so why focus on it that much? Or
I I'm mostly that, but I don't entirely blame the anti-Israel crowd, and whatnot, because I don't entirely blame them because there's a lot that stinks. God, I would rather blame the fucking CIA and FBI.
fair enough. Um. Okay, moving on to the last couple of foreign policy questions I have. You mentioned earlier that say conflicts with like these third-rate powers that you can just topple immediately are different than say conflicts with more peer nations. So where do you find yourself on what is happening currently in with Russia and Ukraine?
Russia and Ukraine is a personal pet project of mine, and it's gonna be probably a view that sours most people. And I'm gonna have to kind of work backwards because I have a personal animosity towards a certain group of political people, namely the Democratic Party. Part of what got me back into politics in the first place was Obama's right side of history speech, which was roughly around the same time that I was emotionally catatonic from a personal loss. And it just rooted itself in my brain ever since then. To me, Russia and Ukraine is the ultimate opportunity to recreate the Vietnam effect. And I know this is going to make me look really heinous that I'm exploiting that from this, but that is essentially politics in a nutshell. We all in this field exploit things for our own personal agendas. And the Ukraine war is basically my version of that, especially when it's not helped by the fact that Biden, oh, big old Biden, himself made it his personal mission to just spend every second, glazing Zelensky's shaft and then just placing his asshole on it and just going buck wild on how amazing Zelensky is. And that didn't help. That did not help my hatred for this, for people in general for this entire fucking conflict. It only further validated and got me stuck in the mentality of, yeah, it sucks that the Ukrainian people are getting killed and the Russian people are getting killed. But, to me, this is Vietnam on steroids. And it's a perfect opportunity for me to play my hand. And, it's been, 16 or 18 years since I had my personal loss, but the people on a certain political side have not improved. Morale has gone the exact opposite of improved. It has gotten exponentially worse. And so I'm going to take every possible moment to be an absolute petty bitch wherever I could possibly do so.
Very nice.
And, you can judge me for, anybody can judge me for it all they wish. And, I respect it. But
Well,
God,
okay, so I
it
would
makes
like
it
to jump
easy.
in here for a second and ask the question, I understand the comparison to Vietnam from that perspective, but due to the lack of hard direct, there's soft direct American influence and participation in Ukraine.
I know.
There's
It's mostly
no hard
analogous.
commitment. So
Yeah.
is it
I'll put it to the,
correct to make the
it is in the context I am explaining it as. It's mostly cultural and referential. It's mostly in analogy. It's mostly in, cost and resources. It's, it's to say, hey, we spent $200 billion in both assets and money, and we wasted it on a pet project for similar reasons of, personal exploitation. And ultimately, that is my personal reference to it, is that we put so much value and effort into. Obviously, they're not the same thing, obviously. But it is still the opportunity that I personally recognized in it. So my goal here with that is that it's mostly cultural, it's mostly referential, in the same way people use Vietnam in historical context. It's obviously not the same. We didn't throw human lives into the mix, but we still threw economic power. We still have diplomatic weight. Countries still constantly demanded the Biden administration for it. I can basically call Biden the second coming of Jimmy Carter. There's a lot of opportunities that I can use to my advantage. That is my goal.
Fair enough. So on that note of the Ukraine war, do you believe that the U.S. has either a moral obligation or even a just based solely on their an obligation based solely on their interests? Would you believe that the U.S. would have any such obligation to defend Taiwan were China to attempt to make a move on them?
That one's actually an interesting one, and I'd have to look more into it because look I look at the China and Taiwan situation more in a context of the Korean War. Um, we have like an Indo-Pacific alliance where we and when it comes to China, we have more of a Soviet comparison as well, in that America could theoretically use the Indo-Pacific alliance to attack China and starve them economically, but I'd advise against it on a tactical level because that would be probably the worst outcome for us. I would rather starve out China financially than resort to any war power because that is a point where we enter a World War level problem. And that is where my anti-interventionism stance comes in, because that is where it's a moment of equals and lesser alliances clashing against each other. And I don't think we have any moral or any sort of economical obligation to do so. We mostly do what we do strategically on behalf of being an ally in the Indo-Pacific. I do not want any smoke with China, and if it comes down to China, I would rather put economic forces and then just let the rest of the alliance do the work for us.
So then,
Think of China like the Flood from Halo, and think of the Indo-Pacific Alliance as the Covenant, and that the strategy is to starve the Chinese out despite being an overwhelming force.
fair enough. So your position then would be fair to say that you're not you don't wouldn't want to just leave Taiwan be to their fate, and instead you'd say you'd rather do things before any of this shit hits the fan to prevent
Right.
such an invasion or so on from happening in the
Right.
first place,
Right.
rather than actually fight once it happens. Is that fair?
In a word, preemption.
Ah, I see.
So before it even crosses their mind, I want to instill the fear that it's not a good idea. I want to be able to be as preventative as possible. That's why we struck Iran, is that we were being preventative. And that is the point. Is that whenever we can avoid it, we must.
Fair enough. Now, segueing from that a bit, do you believe that the U.S. government, either in general or more specifically the current Trump administration, do you believe that they are either focusing too much on foreign policy and not enough on domestic issues? Or do you believe they're focusing the right amount on both? Or do you believe that that they could be focusing more on, say, one or the other?
So I'm going to take this time to kind of establish a contradiction within myself, but it is a contradiction that I believe in. I am pro-U.S. isolationism.
Mhm.
A lot of the stuff I said previous is me kind of justifying what's going on, but ideally speaking, I would rather have U.S. be entirely isolationist in how we approach the U.S. I would rather focus exclusively on domestic issues, and I think we're wasting so much time on foreign issues that domestic issues are metastasizing, or however you fucking pronounce it, to a
Metastasizing?
point. Metastasizing, thank you. It's like a cancer cell.
Mm-hmm.
Domestic issues are a stage 3 or stage 4 cancer. And if we don't end up isolationist at this point, that's going to end up killing the country.
Right. And what issues specifically would you say are the main, like what type of cancer is this? What are the main domestic issues that are currently killing us that need to be addressed before anything else, in your opinion?
So here's where I have stances that sound kind of racial, but not racial. So my biggest concern is that we take the cultural war nowhere near as seriously as we should. We are in an essential Cold War equivalent of a world war within our own borders. We are basically treating cultural war as this inconsequential thing when technological advancements are making the cultural war more important than ever. Stuff like censorship across the board, more media domineering, the constant censorship laws, and that's just one portion of it. There's also the Antifa part, there's the propaganda part, there's the education system part. Every single thing that's going on right now in both the world and the US stems from cultural war issues. That is part of why on Twitter, for example, that I am so focused on culture war stuff. I'm not just using VTubers for side interests. It also intersects with my interests, as a individual as well, and I'm kind of just combining the two. I'm trying to establish essentially I hate putting it this way, but a Twitter war economy. And I'm using that as a means to kind of show how people of different cultural, interests and aptitudes kind of intersect. I think that culture and cultural war issues are way more important than we are giving. And there are a lot of, disjointed issues that become a much bigger problem that we are not addressing. And we are so focused on foreign stuff that we're not putting enough issues on American culture.
Right.
And, Donald Trump's election, despite a lot of my intention, is also a product of that culture war. Now, that's a benevolent thing of the culture war, but it's also influential. Now, if we can influence politics on a high scale through culture, what are we not looking at when it comes to other culture stuff? Look at the Charlie Kirk assassin. That man was heavily influenced by culture to commit murder, to commit atrocities. And look at all the people who celebrated. Would they have celebrated had they not known Charlie Kirk through the internet? No, because a lot of the things they hear are false and are propagated through the internet. So, we have to focus on what's actually being a cancer in our society, and our cancer is culture. And it does not help that culture often also intersects upon racial lines, because oftentimes the problem with a melting pot society is that not everybody in that melting pot holds the same cultural values. Now, am I to say any race is innately bad? No. But there are good and bad in every race. Problem is we use culture as an ethno definition. Look at what people who are white listen to and watch compared to what people of color are listening to and watch. My goal here is to have cultural, mutually agreed upon uniformity so that these culture issues don't become a problem.
Right. And it's good that you mentioned the assassination of Charlie Kirk, because I wanted to touch on that type of violence specifically, because it seems from what we know about the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk, he was at the very least related to a group of people that we have on the show referred to as Trantifa. right? It's the whole Antifa plus, transgender violent extremists. And this group, from what we have discussed previously, seems like its main area of operation is in your state. And
Correct.
so I was wondering just if you could elaborate on, do you find that this specific group is one of those main threats that you are talking about?
Yes and no. I want to take some time to kind of say I don't really agree with the Trantifa label.
Fair enough. Could you
Mainly
explain
just
why?
well, here's the thing. One of the things I do in politics is I start consolidating different groups under a specific political umbrella, the MAGA umbrella. There's a lot of people from different minority groups in that big tent philosophy. The Trantifa thing feels more coincidental, but that's as far as I'm going to go in that regard. I still think Antifa is a huge problem. And to understand the problem, how many of you guys are anime fans? And if you've heard, and how many of you anime fans have heard of the anime called Durarara?
I'm
Anybody?
I'm pretty sure we're all anime fans here. I've heard of that
Yeah.
specific anime, but I've never seen it. Oh wait,
Yeah,
wait,
well,
Anybody?
wait. You mean that's the one with the headless the girl who?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Actually, yeah,
It's
I have
mostly
seen it.
gang warfare.
Yes.
It's mostly a story about gang warfare, but there are also a lot of like simpler themes that define it. But what's relevant to my conversation is the following: Antifa runs the same as the dollars. Anybody who knows that anime and knows who the dollars is will instantly click onto what I'm referring to.
That's actually
And it's a very
that's a good analogy.
when people say that Antifa is decentralized, this is what they mean. And they also share the same exact communication line of how they coordinate too. They coordinate through websites, they coordinate through forums, they coordinate through culture, they coordinate through technology. They don't necessarily, coordinate through normal means. And the few times they do coordinate through normal means, they look really lame, really cringe, and nowhere near as effective as they actually function. But when you understand the fact that they are also just as hooked into technology as I am, that's when you kind of understand that I'm in a similar but diametric opposite mentality to them. Antifa is basically one of the groups I am always in a constant culture war with. And I am often the guy that keeps trying to basically use X and other social media platforms as counter-programming.
Right.
That is
Being-
generally...
Being
Sorry about that, what?
from the state where they are most active in, have you ever had any actual live engagements with these people? This Antifa?
Live? No. No. I do not even go near Portland anymore. It's been a cesspool for years, even pre-Antifa. It has been the city in the biggest economic decline with the most political influence. It's a very weird dynamic, but they have the most power and influence in the state, despite being in an economic form of self-destruction.
Right. So, on that note, one other group I wanted to ask you about, specifically as it comes to these dangerous and violent groups. This is kind of a half domestic, I'd say half foreign policy question. What, if anything, do you think needs to be done about the cartels that are just south of the border?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Because this is one of those few exceptions that I have to give for interventionism. Because ultimately, the cartels have become the one foreign issue I think we should also focus on. Because while we have ICE at home, which is a thing we need to have,
Yes.
we also aren't putting enough time and need into stuff that's outside our border, and ICE does not have that jurisdiction. So what we need is a standard force that functions as a force, kind of a PMC style, that needs to operate in an ability to deal in a jurisdiction where we can handle the cartel. And hey, as a senator, I do have the ability to vote and propose bills in favor of that.
So you would
So if-
vote, assuming it came to the floor, you would vote in favor of military action against the cartels?
Correct, absolutely, without hesitation. I'd be salivating at the prospect. I'd be championing that as a form of political opportunism. That is how much I get a hard on for that.
Very nice. That is good to know. As to, you also mentioned ICE or ICE. What are your thoughts on their current domestic activities? Are you in support of the mass deportations? Do you think they have gone too far? Do you think they might have not gone far enough? Where are you on that domestic front?
To be frank, I oscillate on that. I'm going to put it to you this way. When I was still doing the governor run before I switched to the Senate run, I was going to build my platform on handing Portland to ICE on a silver platter. I am for ICE raids, but even I see a couple of instances as not the biggest W. Like going into schools of kids to do that seems to be a little bit of a faux pas or poor taste. I get why they did it, but I don't entirely agree with it, but most I do. Like Alex Pretty, for example, deserved everything he fucking got.
Yeah.
But for personal reasons, I'm not in favor of scarring children. Like there's a line I felt that was crossed there. I think that what ICE needs is more pro-militaristic training so that they have more restraint and more precision so that they're not harming innocent people in the process.
Understandable. But at the same time, I think, would you say it's fair to say, like, if you have an illegal who is, pulled over by
Obviously.
ICE, and they have a kid in the car, you can't just
Right.
take the parent and leave the kid there. You're gonna have to take them with.
Right.
All right.
No, I do agree. But here's what I am getting at. It's a necessary evil, right?
Yeah.
On a moral scale, it does seem to a lot of people to be evil, but it's also necessary. We do this so that innocent people can sleep at night. Laren Reiki or whatever her name. Laken Riley.
Yeah.
Laken Riley. For all the faux concern over, kids who are immigrants, ICE exists so that we prevent more Laken Rileys. It's a matter of, do we save one immigrant or do we save 100 Americans? I'm always going to be on the side of saving 100 Americans.
Yes.
It's a necessary evil, but emphasis on the necessary.
Fair enough. Yeah, I definitely think any politician from any country should have the focus on protecting their people as opposed to protecting other people who aren't part of their country.
Yes.
Yes. Unfortunately, only one political party in the U.S. seems to have that position, but it is the one you are currently running on. So, I know that a lot of people in Congress, and senators especially, since they have some of the most power in Congress, they have their own, pet issues, right? Like Lindsey Graham,
Correct.
he has, war is his pet issue. Some people, it might be, school choice issues, that their pet issue. Some people, it might be immigration. Where would you find yourself putting most of your focus on were you to become the next senator from Oregon?
Domestic issues specifically. Things like, so in order to explain my focus on school choice, Oregon is in a very bad place. Very bad place when it comes to education. It's in the bottom 3, if not the worst. And it's for several reasons. First reason, 1, Oregon school funding is inherently dependent upon attendance.
Interesting.
That should not be a thing. I don't care what anyone says. Attendance numbers should not be a thing. There's a billion ways that could go wrong. Second, another reason why I'm school choice is that we do not have graduation requirements anymore for the sake of equity. And I do not agree with that whatsoever. Then there's the increase of school violence. And with that it screams to me to be a problem. And then, out of everything else, we are also paying way more for administrators than we are for school teachers. We are spending more money on substitute teachers rather than consistent teachers that are long and tenured. That's one part of it. The other part of it is I am very much focused on culture narratives. And I've touched upon a couple with like the Ukraine, with, with Antifa. Another is that I'm very much anti-censorship. I'm very libertarian, as they like to joke around when it comes to that. I want as little government power in the daily lives of the American and Oregonian people as I possibly can make it. And I find that, I hate Lindsey Graham. I fucking hate his stupid fucking pencil neck, geek ass, bitch ass, couldn't play a single round of football ass mentality with his yee ass fucking haircut. I despise Lindsey Graham on every possible way. And the fact that his whole thing is war just only further does that in for me.
Understand.
To me, I want to cut out the cancer that is in American society specifically. In a weird way, I'm even more MAGA than Trump is.
It's always good. So, going back to your state specifically, now, since none of us are from there and we don't know that much about it, tell us, in your opinion, what are the worst things about the current government of your state?
Self-indulgence for starters. No one in power is really doing anything for the benefit of the Oregon people. And in order to explain this, I have to explain to you the political landscape of Oregon. Oregon is a state 98% conservative with 2 cities holding it hostage. Portland and Eugene. Even if you just remove Portland, you would have the same situation as, politically of blue for like 40 to 50 years, but Republican. If you just removed Portland entirely. Like half the time, if it wasn't for the economy, I would just say, fuck Portland, Washington could have Portland. Because then Oregon would be pretty much red dominated across the board. And before, like, people on the opposite scale of things say, well, land does not elect people, they really need to study their American history. It is explicit within the Constitution that, yes, land specifically does determine, who is in politics.
Yep.
Because specifically,
the smaller states at the beginning of the country would never have joined the Union. You have to understand that the times that the founding fathers were in, land ownership was a key proponent of citizenship. Like the entire concept of slavery was built on the idea that slaves cannot own land. Like that is the entire premise of America, is that and here's a fun little counter argument for people who say land does not elect people, is that if land does not elect people, then slavery should never have been an issue. If this country is supposedly systemically racist, that is essentially an admission that land does in fact elect people.
Because ultimately, if land didn't elect people, then you can't necessarily say America is systemically racist. It's a catch-22 contradiction in
Yeah.
Democrat ideology. Because you have to have land ownership in order to be systemically racist.
Very true. So once more going back to your home region, have you ever heard of the term Cascadia?
Term Cascadia?
Yes.
No, I have not. What does that mean?
Cascadia, it is, if I am correct, it is a...
Oh, you mean just the word Cascadia?
Yes.
Oh, that, yeah. Sorry, I thought you were talking about something
No,
entirely different.
I was talking about the concept, the theoretical state that would exist in that region that would be known as Cascadia. Are you familiar
Okay.
with that?
That I am not, no.
Oh.
But
Um,
Cascadia means like a bunch of different things to Oregonians, so you're gonna have to forgive me for that.
It's all right. So there is a group of people in both Washington, Oregon, and also parts of British Columbia that basically want to form their own state, and that state would be called Cascadia instead of the current states we have there. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you, as someone who lives in that region, what you might think of such a concept and such an idea.
There is a load of problems I have systemically, but it starts with one question: what parts of British Columbia? What parts of British Columbia, and where do they lean demographically?
Not
Because that's gonna,
Vancouver, not Vancouver as it is known, but the other parts, the more rural.
if they're, I could feasibly see it possible if they were conservative states, because then that would balance out the balance of power. And arguably, if the British Columbia areas that are conservative were to be the ones that to make Cascadia, I could see it be feasible. But if the parts that are wanting to be part of Cascadia are liberal, that creates a power imbalance so badly that it makes California look like paradise.
Fair enough. And for the record, both for the chat as well as for your convenience, I post you a map of what the people who wish to have it look, what the map would look like. So what parts of your state, what parts of the other region. That is if you can see, that is the theoretical border of Cascadia.
Okay, so is it in the chat?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, no. No, 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 no. No, I do not like... Wait, no, maybe Idaho may give some hope. But no, a lot of that does not look like good territory. Oh, that is... Like, a solid chunk of Oregon is entirely the problem. Like, a lot... Like, the green parts of Oregon that are in the center are where all the problems lie. And all of the center upward is exactly the bottom border of Cascadia in that one specific region. No, not when you have Spokane and Seattle and Olympia and Tacoma. No.
So those are all the bad regions.
Yeah. Western Oregon and Eastern Oregon are fine. And the fact that almost all of Idaho is in there and parts of Montana give me hope. But all of Washington and all the big parts of Oregon look like absolute hell. Like, this could pan out to be worse than California. I am serious. Like, it's even going all the way from, like, into parts of Alaska. Like, isn't there an Alaskan city that is extremely liberal at, like, the very border between whatever YT is and Alaska?
I think so.
Because, and that's going to be the problem, is that there's a lot of high density that lean liberal in Cascadia, to the point where it would just be Oregon situation in a higher macro, because Oregon is entirely enslaved by Eugene and Portland, and land-wise is just entire. Other than those two places, is entirely conservative. But in the way Cascadia looks, it's basically the same scenario but worse, and economically it would be worse than California.
If I'm not mistaken, that looks like the exact opposite of Greater Idaho.
You are very astute on that.
Yes. That was actually going to be my next question. Where are you on the idea of Greater Idaho?
I'm not for Greater Idaho. I'm for a theory of mind on that called Jefferson. Basically, a lot of Eastern Oregon that is not going to join Idaho, but is still going to be separate from Portland and Eugene.
Right. Would that only encompass Eastern Oregon, or would it also be parts
Yes.
of so not
Yep.
none of the good
You know
parts
how-
of Washington State either?
You know how Virginia and West Virginia are?
Yeah,
Same basic concept.
I see.
Okay.
Like, I would love to live in the state of Jefferson, but not the way Oregon is now.
Yeah. Well, the comparison with Virginia and West Virginia looking, West Virginia is looking more and more good as Virginia descends into Democrat hell that it is becoming.
And the reason why I say I'm not Greater Idaho is that I have a lot of problems with Boise specifically. Boise is becoming more and more like Portland by the day, maybe even by the second. To me, Greater Idaho seems like it's just delaying the problem and kicking the can decades down the line, and I'm always paranoid because I've lived in a state that has had Portland its entire lifespan. So anything that's pro-Portland politically, I am immediately getting red flags on.
Fair enough. Also, being that we are actually recording this on the heels of another YouTuber just recently winning his primary election, if a bill came to your desk in which the bill offered to repeal the NFA, would you vote for that bill?
NFA, hold on.
National
I'm not familiar.
Firearms Act. That's the bill that makes owning machine guns that are before they were grandfathered in illegal.
Also,
No, I wouldn't.
short-barreled shotguns, rifles,
Yes.
pretty much anything fun.
I am
Suppressors.
very much the Second Amendment. I am very much a constitutionalist on that matter. I do not support anything that infringes upon a person's rights in any regard, and I do not believe. Well, I don't believe in the concept of my rights end where yours begin. I believe that, obviously there are some legal restrictions, but I don't think those restrictions should come at anybody's autonomy. The way I see restrictions of any sort is for safety purposes to maximize freedom. I do not buy into, if you've looked at the gun-free zones, they don't solve the problem. They just keep adding more restrictions, but it doesn't solve the shooting problem. So, I'm very much a results-oriented guy. If the gun restrictions do not make the problem better and arguably make them worse, the logical conclusion is to loosen restrictions on gun ownership, not tighten them. So, any restrictions on the Second Amendment should only be done to make sure there's social cohesion in America. But it's been demonstrated clearly time and again that it has done the opposite. Because criminals don't believe in following the law, that's why they're criminals. And restricting guns just to me sounds like, I call it gun tyranny. Because it doesn't control the guns, it just prevents people from owning them. And in the case of criminals, it doesn't. So I'm very much against any sort of gun restrictions. Especially if they do not, bring the safety that they are promising to have.
Understood.
So no, I'm not gonna be for the NFA. Sorry.
Very good. So
One comment very quickly, because I misspoke. The NFA doesn't ban the items I was talking about: short-barreled rifles, shotguns.
They restrict them though.
It restricts. It heavily restricts them. I just wanted to clarify myself because I misspoke.
Just To me, that's a distinction without a difference. Same
Yes.
problem, same exact everything, same answer.
Yes.
Okay.
So as we are beginning to run out of time for this interview,
Wait,
I
what?
just wanted to say, does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Crosscast here? Going once, going twice. All right. Then, do you have anything else you would like to let voters know before we have to end this interview?
I am a man who I simply am a guy that wanted to rise above his social status. I grew up poor, and I'm pretty decently middle class, I guess, what I would describe myself. I am the epitome of just a guy wanting to rise above his status and do right by those who would give me the ability, the honor, the privilege of becoming senator. Because here's the deal. I get a lot out of this. I get to have my dream career, and I also get to solidify myself in history, because there is one component that I have not mentioned. And that component is that this would be my first job, period. It would be monumental on a massive scale, even more massive than Trump's victories. And if people were to give me this opportunity, to give me the ability to rise above my station, to be able to do something to make his state better, I will promise them this, is that I will do my utmost to uphold the values of Oregon. Oregon is everything to me. It will be the place I was born, and it is the place I will die. I don't even intend to live anywhere else but Oregon, even though it's got its problems. Because at the end of the day, no one will fight your wars for you. I'm just the guy who greases the wheels. That will be my role as a senator, to grease the wheels so you guys can drive. I'm the guy who will be your mechanic, the guy who makes everything work.
So you
And
really
work
are
for
ride
you.
or die for your estate. You have no desire
Yes.
to leave, even if it continues going downhill. You'd rather stay and
No.
fight.
Because to me, it's the same problem I have with politics in general these days. It's always everyone else trying to solve other people's problems for them. I just don't trust people in general, and I don't believe I can have my problems be solved by other people.
Understandable.
And if I can help solve other people's problems, that's a bonus. But I want to enable people to solve their own.
Yes. And actually, since we have spent a fair amount of time talking about all the problems in Oregon, why don't you tell the people out here, what are some of the good things about your estate?
Well, for starters, the nature around it is beautiful. It is a beautiful state to go to. It's not too rainy like it is in, Washington. It's not too damn hot in the summer, though it gets that place in some points, like in California. It's not entirely economically destitute like California. Portland's not entirely as bad as Los Angeles, though it's getting there. And Oregon is in my opinion, the pioneer state, the state that always leads the charge. To me, it's always been the place for community. That if you want to build a community of people, whether it's Eastern, whether it's Portland, whether it's Salem, whether it's literal community or emotional community or anywhere in between, Oregon has always been that place. It has always been the place that is a bit weird, with some weird people. But, John Brown exists, and he was from Oregon. People who were influential in the Civil War came from Oregon. People who made some of the biggest impacts are from Oregon. One of the presidents in history, I believe it was Hoover or Harding, was from Oregon, or at least is considered an adoptive Oregonian. We have always been a place that leads the charge. And we have been a place that's the most accepting very much a you do you, chief sort of mentality. We've always been about a state of leadership. We've always been about the first one to lead the charge. We are we are the banner boys. We are the ones who carry the banner into war. We are the ones who scout. We are the ones who map. We are the ones who take the very rough path and make it beaten. We are the ones that light the way. When the rest of America goes dark, we are the light. We are the future. We are the past, the present, the everything. We are the most loving. We are the most caring, the most faithful, the most brutal, the most judging. We do everything. We are liberal. We are conservative. We are MAGA. We are Antifa. We are everything in a singular state entirely. We are, no matter how much Oregon fucks up, I will always, always love this state.
Understandable. And for the people out there who may be listening, just to let you know, the Oregon primary is on May the 19th of 2026. So anyone who may want to vote for you, make sure to vote May 19th, 2026. Or early voting. I'm not sure when that starts. It's always best to vote early.
Let me type that. Let me search that real quick.
Yes,
Voting or Oregon primary.
It is always best to vote early if you can, because sometimes stuff...
Yes.
Especially in these Democrat states where,
Yes.
Voting irregularities tend to happen on election day when Republicans tend to are more likely to vote. So best to cast your vote early in order to, prevent all these shenanigans from happening.
Yep. If you want to make it too big to rig, that is how you do it.
Yes.
You always do early and late voting. Never on time for some reason, just early and late. Because that's how Democrats love to do it.
Yep.
Late, early, but never fucking on time.
Mm. And full of dead people, too.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started on that. I swear half of our population are just dead people. Might as well say I'm the main character of The Sixth Sense, because I see a lot of dead people.
Yes. So tell everyone who may be listening where they can find you. What potential, social media handles you might have. If anyone wants to go learn more.
I have a personal social media account known as @IamNor6. It's where I do both my VTubing stuff and my political stuff. I'm very much a self-indulgent person. I write articles on there. I do a lot of interdynamics with between users on there. I love living on that place. And it's basically the primary hub of information. You might see a bunch of anime pictures or talking about anime or pro wrestling or whatnot, but I also do politics. I tend to make myself more of a cultural figure on there. I say and do a lot of crazy stuff. It's both my political account and my personal account. So the Twitter account is @IamNor6.
All right.
And I hope to see you there. I'm already on the road to 4K.
Nice. We'll make sure to include links to all your channels as well in the description for the video. And since you mentioned it, and this is a coincidence I just noticed while looking it up, you said you're a pro wrestling fan, right?
Yes, very much so.
All right, what date did we say the primary was? Do you remember?
You picked up on it.
Yes.
Oh, nice. The date. The cane. Yes.
I'm glad you picked up on that too.
Yeah. This is going to be the main source of my information. I have it in the topics section.
All right, good to know. Then, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes tonight's special episode of the WarWolf Podcast. Say goodbye, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I will still appear on podcasts, of course, whenever I'm able. It's been a pleasure to actually just do like my politics and like interpersonal stuff for once, as just me rather than an internet persona. But it has been a pleasure. I love going on podcasts. I love going on social media stuff. I love every opportunity I can get. It's always a pleasure. Meeting new people means I can further refine my understanding of things, because people will always have something that I do not know, and I just hope I can give something that I do know in return.
All right, and with that, good night, everyone. We shall see you next week. And